Hey, tonight we're exploring something quiet and quietly strange. Not monsters under the bed or dreams that scream and vanish at dawn, but something softer, more unsettling in its subtlety. We're exploring your memory, or rather, the version of memory you think you have. It's late now. The world has settled into a hush. Your room hums gently with background noise. Maybe a soft fan spinning in the corner. Maybe just the breath of silence. And while your body rests, your mind wanders, not forward, but back. Memories feel solid, familiar, yours. You remember what happened, right? The time you fell from your bike, your grandmother's voice at sunset, the way your friends smiled just before they moved away. You remember them not as facts, but as scenes, rich with color, tone, sound, warmth. They live somewhere inside you like old photographs sealed in glass. But here's the strange thing. The more clearly you remember, the less accurate your memory might be. And that isn't because your brain is broken. It's because it's beautifully creative. You see, your memory isn't a hard drive. It's more like a painter with poor lighting. It works in layers. It adds color to shadows. It forgets corners and fills them with guesses. And sometimes it paints over something entirely. One quietly fascinating fact from neuroscience. Every time you recall a memory, your brain briefly destabilizes it and then rewrites it during reconsolidation, like opening a Word document, editing it, and saving over the old file, all without telling you. So the version you remember now may already be a memory of a memory, or a memory of a story you told, or one you heard, or one you wanted to believe. There's a quiet eeriness to that, isn't there? Not frightening, but gently disorienting, because it means that even the moments you hold most dear, the vivid ones, the painful ones, the magical ones, may not have happened quite the way you recall. There was a study once, quietly disturbing in its results. Participants were told a detailed story about a childhood event that never happened, getting lost in a shopping mall. Many swore they remembered it vividly. Some even added new details, the color of a stranger's shirt, the echo of their own crying voice. But it had never occurred. Your brain wants coherence more than truth. So when truth is missing, it stitches together something close enough and tells it to you in your own voice. Researchers still wonder if memory is even meant to record history or simply to help us survive, to keep our story intact, to make us feel whole, even if the seams are imaginary. You probably won't survive this world unchanged, but that's the point. So before you get too comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you enjoy quiet stories like this. And if you're still awake, drop your location and local time in the comments. It's always nice to see who else is drifting alongside us. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You breathe slowly as the room fades and your mind becomes less concerned with the day you had, and more with the shapes rising from your memory's surface. A scent that pulls you into a hallway you can't quite name. A pair of shoes on a childhood floor. A soft melody that echoes even though you haven't heard it in years. It's It's like fog rising around an old lake. You don't try to hold it, you just let it rise. And somewhere beneath that lake, memories you haven't touched in years swirl gently. You reach for one just to see what happens. It arrives, mostly intact. But part of it feels off. Was the room blue? Or was that later? Did someone laugh? Were you wearing shoes? You don't know, but your brain does something kind. It fills in the rest. You don't notice the seam, you just accept the image. Because this is what minds do when they love you. They protect the story. A whisper now, rising through the quiet. What if your clearest memories were soft lies your brain told you to keep you safe? Maybe the pain was a little worse than you recall. Maybe the joy was a little smaller. Maybe someone didn't actually say the words that echo in your head at night, but they needed to. Maybe the moment never really happened, but it still mattered. That's the heart of this journey tonight. Not to prove your memories wrong, but to gently wonder, what if memory was never meant to be right? What if it was only meant to be meaningful? Let that thought settle with you, like fog curling around your ankles, soft and slow and thick with wonder. And as it does, we'll step a little deeper into a mind that believes everything it says, even when none of it is real. You move deeper now, not through space, but through thought. The room remains still, the hum of a fan, maybe the quiet rhythm of your own breath. But your mind begins to walk, slowly, without effort, into the hidden machinery behind memory. You start to realize that your brain doesn't record life like a camera. There is no reel of perfect footage somewhere behind your eyes. There's no file labeled exactly how it happened. What you have instead is a story. And the storyteller is you. Not the you that talks or worries or scrolls through your phone late at night, but a deeper you. The one who strings moments into meaning, who rearranges scattered thoughts into continuity. A quiet author in the shadows, writing your life and editing as it goes. One fascinating truth about the brain. It doesn't store memories whole. It breaks experiences down into fragments, sights, sounds, feelings, and reassembles them each time you remember. So when you remember a moment, your first kiss, your childhood bedroom, the face of someone you lost, your brain is performing an act of reconstruction, not retrieval. Like someone trying to rebuild a house from scattered bricks, faded paint, and a sketch they only half recall. And it does this beautifully, convincingly. So well, in fact, that you don't realize how much of the house is being guessed. You're not lying to yourself. You're just believing what your mind wants you to see. That's what makes the brain such a remarkable storyteller. It doesn't want the memory to be true. It wants it to make sense. And more than that, it wants the story to help you survive. There's a quietly eerie consequence to this. You could swear you remember someone being cruel to you, and maybe they were. Or maybe your brain emphasized their words to protect you from trusting them again. You might recall a teacher praising you, a moment that shaped your path when maybe they never said quite those words. But your mind needed you to believe it, so you'd keep going. This isn't deception, it's compassion. You think of your memory as a vault, but it's more like a stage where your mind builds scenery and recasts characters every time you visit. The lighting changes, the costumes shift. Sometimes you don't notice. Sometimes you do, and you shrug it off. Was it always like that? You wonder. And then the moment passes, and you believe again. Your brain tells you the same bedtime story over and over. Sometimes it changes the ending. You rarely catch it in the act. There's a strange little detail from cognitive science. When people remember events, the parts of the brain that light up most strongly aren't the ones tied to accuracy. They're the ones tied to imagination. Your memory is powered by the same network that lets you dream, invent, or visualize. That's why memory is so often distorted, not because it's broken, but because it's built for flexibility. Your mind edits your memories like a director refining a film. It removes awkward cuts, adds slow motion to the heartbreak, plays soft music in the background of triumph. And it does all of this without your permission, because it thinks you'll like the result better. Researchers still debate the purpose of this editing. Is it just a flaw in the system? Or is it part of something deeper? The brain's attempt to create a coherent self? If you remembered everything exactly as it happened, would you even feel like you? Or would you just be a list of data, a raw, unfiltered archive? Maybe your memory tells a more useful truth, one that makes sense of chaos, one that gives you a place in the world. You take a breath. You think of a moment from years ago, something small, a glance, a word, the color of a room. And you know now, it's probably not quite right. But does that matter? Because if the memory made you feel something true, maybe that's what lasts. And what if the way your brain edits the past is also the way it teaches you who you are? You've built yourself on these stories, not all accurate, but all powerful. A patchwork of impressions, told again and again until the seams disappear. You are the author of a life being constantly rewritten, even when you aren't looking. So you lie there, quiet now. The room feels a little softer. The thoughts in your head begin to blend, past and present curling together like steam in the dark. You let go of the idea that you need your memories to be precise, and you hold on instead to how they've shaped you, gently, imperfectly, like the ocean reshaping a stone. The storyteller in your mind is still working, even now, editing, reframing, whispering, and so you drift on into the next layer of this quiet unraveling. You settle deeper. Your pillow presses gently against your cheek, the air around you still and forgiving. The world outside fades, and what remains is quieter, more internal. You feel your mind drifting again, not toward answers, but toward something vaguer, looser, more like mist than fact. And in that mist, you begin to notice gaps, the missing pieces, moments you should remember, but don't. The walk home that day in autumn, what your room looked like in 7th grade, how you got that scar on your hand. It's strange how the edges of your life blur so easily. You remember beginnings, endings, moments brightened by emotion, but in between, nothing, just soft blankness. And yet the story still feels whole, because your brain, clever and devoted, refuses to let the gaps stay empty. It fills them in for you. Not with lies exactly, but with narrative glue, quiet guesses, seamless edits, a sensation, a voice, a blur of light where something probably happened. One fascinating insight from memory research: people will confidently describe details of an event they don't actually recall if the context seems familiar enough. In one study, subjects watched a short film. Days later, researchers inserted a completely fabricated scene into their recall. Nearly half described the fake scene as if it were real, adding sensory details and emotions. They didn't realize the moment never happened. Because the brain doesn't flag what it invents, it just smooths over the absence, like paint over a crack in the wall. And this is something your mind does constantly. You don't notice the skipped steps between moments because your brain fills the silence with continuity. The way film works, a series of still images blinking fast enough to trick you into seeing motion. Memory is the same, a flicker of thoughts. Disjointed, really. But you believe the story is continuous because that belief keeps you sane. There's something eerie in that comfort. You could live your whole life remembering the shape of a day, the general arc of how it unfolded, without ever realizing that half of it was inferred. Not remembered, just constructed. Your first day at a new school. You probably recall walking into the classroom, feeling awkward, scanning for faces. But do you remember where your hands were? What shoes you wore? What happened in the second hour? Likely not, but your mind doesn't panic. It calmly fills in just enough to make the memory feel complete. You trust it. Why wouldn't you? Your brain is trying to be helpful. It doesn't want you to feel confusion. It wants to protect your narrative, to preserve the thread of you. And so it builds, gently, layer by layer. A glance you assume someone gave you, a word you must have said. The sensation of certainty, even when none is available. And the strange part? This happens even now, even tonight. As you lie there drifting somewhere between alertness and sleep, your thoughts circle memories you haven't visited in years. A face comes to mind. You feel like you remember it, but perhaps you're remembering the last time you thought about it, and not the moment itself. A memory of a memory, a copy of a copy. And each time, just a little blurrier than the last. Still, you feel something genuine, a tug of emotion, a sudden warmth, a flicker of regret. Does it matter if the image isn't accurate? If the feeling still is? Researchers still argue over this. Should memory be precise to be useful? Or is its power rooted in its emotional truth, the meaning it gives us, even if the details are wrong? Maybe the memory of someone comforting you, whether it happened or not, still heals something real. Maybe the invented warmth of a moment long gone is enough to keep you going. And if that's true, then maybe the gaps don't need to be filled with facts, only with care. You take another breath. The air is soft and slow now. You feel your body settling and your thoughts unspooling gently like ribbon in water. Some part of you still believes your memories are accurate, and some deeper part now knows they aren't. But both versions of you can exist. Both can rest tonight. Because memory, like sleep, doesn't need to be perfect, only safe. only soft. You float just above the forgotten places now. You can't see them, but your mind quietly, constantly is smoothing the spaces, painting in the blanks, whispering, "Yes, this happened," even when it didn't. And in that whisper, you let go, not of the memories, but of the need for them to be complete. You don't need every piece, only the shape, only the story that brings you peace. Let it drift, let it settle, let it stay. You drift a little farther now. The room hasn't changed, but your awareness has softened. The edges of thought blur. The warmth of your blanket wraps you like fog on a quiet lake. And in this state, your mind opens to a strange possibility that not all the memories you carry belong to you. You probably wouldn't question it. After all, memory feels so personal, so internal. But sometimes what feels like your memory may have slipped in from somewhere else. It starts innocently. A story someone told you when you were young. A photo you've seen so many times it feels like you were there. The way your parents describe something, and you nod, "Yes, I remember," even if you never did. That moment in the backyard, that trip to the beach, the time you got lost at the fair, you can see it. The sky, the sound, the taste of popcorn. But if you trace the memory back far enough, there's nothing there. No first-hand experience, no original moment. Just a story someone gave you. One quietly unsettling study showed that people can form vivid memories of events they never lived, just by being shown doctored photographs or told persuasive stories by someone they trust. They'll even defend those memories, convinced of the details, swearing it's real. Your brain doesn't verify the source of a memory. It just decides whether the image feels true enough to accept. And if it does, it settles it into place, as if it had always belonged to you. You might remember holding a cousin's hand on a foggy morning, when in reality, you weren't even on that trip. You might recall a joke your friend told at dinner, one you actually read in a book. The mind stitches familiarity into ownership. It's not deception, it's integration. You are built from stories. Yours, yes, but also theirs. Memory is a social fabric, not just a private archive. You've absorbed expressions, turns of phrase, gestures, even emotions. Sometimes you recall them so vividly that they feel like yours. But who whispered them into you? You may never know. And your mind, tender and trusting, doesn't need to. There's a phrase in cognitive psychology, source amnesia. It means remembering something, but forgetting where it came from. Not in a vague way, but completely. You know the memory, but you no longer know whether you saw it, heard it, dreamed it, or imagined it. This is how people come to believe in moments that never happened, and how people can inherit stories without realizing they've done so. A sibling describes a childhood prank. You laugh and suddenly you can see it. The room, the faces, the moment frozen in amber. And just like that, it becomes your memory too. There's something beautiful in that, if you let it be. You are not alone in your remembering. You carry echoes of other people's moments. Their joy, their confusion, their pain. Little borrowed pieces that blend with your own until the line disappears. And even more curious, you've likely passed along false memories to others. You've told stories with certainty, moments that felt real, but weren't, and they've become part of someone else's memory landscape. Your life has rippled into the minds of others, and theirs into yours. We are all part of each other's stories, even in the remembering. Researchers still wonder whether there's a functional reason for this blending. Does it strengthen social bonds? Help create shared identity? Or is it simply the cost of a brain designed for connection over precision? Whatever the reason, the result is the same. You are a mosaic of impressions, not all yours, not all real, but all meaningful. As you lie there now, still warm drifting, you might think of a memory, one you've carried for years. Try to trace it. Where did it come from? Do you remember being there? Or do you just remember remembering it? If it turns out it wasn't really yours, does that make it less important? Or maybe more? Maybe it was given to you for a reason. Maybe it helped shape who you became, even if it began in someone else's mind. There's a tenderness in that idea, that we are vessels for each other's memories, caretakers of stories, both true and invented. So let the lines blur, let them mix. Let the stories merge like fog on a window, soft and shapeless. Because in the end, what matters most may not be whether it was your memory, only that it became a part of you. You exhale, and in the quiet between breaths, 1,000 borrowed images flutter and fade. Not gone, just drifting, waiting to be remembered again, however they choose to return. You continue floating now, deeper into the fog of thought, where truth and memory quietly slip past each other. Not like enemies, more like old friends who nod in passing, but never stop to agree. And here, in this twilight space, something strange begins to shimmer. A memory. So clear, so certain, so definitely true. You've always remembered it that way. Everyone did. Until someone tells you it never happened. Maybe it's something small. A line from a movie you swear you heard. A brand logo that looks just slightly off. The color of a character's clothes. The death of someone you thought was already gone. You pause. You check. You search. And there it is. The contradiction. Your memory versus reality. The Mandela effect. Named after the strange phenomenon where countless people distinctly remembered Nelson Mandela dying in prison in the 1980s, even though he lived for decades after. It wasn't a few people. It was many, from different countries, ages, backgrounds. They remembered news reports, funeral coverage, reactions, none of which ever occurred. That's the eerie part. It's not one person misremembering. It's thousands, all believing in the same false memory. And this happens all the time. You might recall the Monopoly man wearing a monocle. He doesn't. You might remember Pikachu's tail having a black tip. It never did. You may swear the Berenstain Bears were spelled with an ein. They weren't. And yet, your memory tells you otherwise. You remember seeing it, reading it, living it. But what if you didn't? One quietly fascinating explanation. Your brain stores patterns, not details. It remembers the type of thing you saw, not the thing itself. So when something matches the pattern but not the specifics, your mind fills in the rest, automatically, confidently. It's why people remember sayings like, "Luke, I am your father" from Star Wars. Even though the actual line is different, but your mind recreates it in the way that feels right, and that feeling becomes the truth. Another theory? Parallel timelines, glitches in the simulation, shifting realities. Of course, there's no evidence for those things, but it's strangely comforting, isn't it? To imagine that your memory was right, just from a version of the world that's gone now. Researchers still don't fully agree on what causes the Mandela effect. Some say it's just group suggestibility, a false idea repeated often enough that it feels shared. Others suggest deeper cognitive structures at work. Schema-based encoding, memory consolidation errors, temporal lobe activity. But maybe the reason matters less than the experience. What's unsettling is not the error itself. It's how certain you felt. That flash of indignation when you learn you're wrong. That quiet sense of disorientation. Like stepping onto a stair that isn't there. The memory was so real. And then suddenly, it isn't. You might feel embarrassed at first, but maybe there's something oddly human in it. Because this isn't a flaw in your brain. It's a feature of how it works. Your mind isn't a perfect historian. It's a storyteller, remember? And if a certain story fits too well, your brain will adopt it, even when the truth is different. You lie there now, listening to the hum of your space, and you begin to wonder, how many of your memories feel shared because others repeated them? How many stories do you believe simply because they were told often enough? Memory is social. It's shaped by culture, language, repetition. We don't remember in isolation. We remember as part of a group, and sometimes that means our memories adjust to match the tribe. It feels safer that way, to remember what others remember, to feel that familiar sense of joy. Yes, I saw it too. And maybe that's why we're so shaken when the memory falls apart. But there's also something comforting in this shared confusion, that so many people, strangers across time and space, experience the same false remembering. It means we're not alone in the distortion. We are never the only ones remembering wrongly. And if that's true, then maybe memory isn't about being right. Maybe it's about being connected. The Mandela effect shows us how easy it is to believe, and how belief in memory is often stronger than fact. You think now about something you were once sure of, a childhood moment, a favorite scene, a name, a sound, a shape. Do you still believe it? Would you let it go if the world told you it never happened? Or would you hold it gently anyway, like a dream that meant something, even if it never came true? You breathe again. The space around you quiets. The false and the real settle side by side, neither asking for judgment, only for rest. You're deeper now, somewhere between the rhythm of your breathing and the soft hum of the night. You can feel the weight of memory shifting. Not because it's growing heavier, but because you're beginning to notice who's been doing the editing. Not the conscious you, not the logical, deliberate you, but something quieter, something more reactive and deeply human. Emotion. You may think memory is built from the facts of an event. Who was there, what happened, when and where. But really, memory is stitched together with feeling. Not the data of a moment, but the emotional imprint it left behind. That's why you can't remember what you had for lunch a week ago, but you remember how it felt to sit beside someone who hurt you or held you 10 years ago. One quietly remarkable fact from psychology: the amygdala, the part of the brain responsible for processing emotion, plays a central role in how memories are formed and stored. When something emotional happens, good or bad, the amygdala flags it as important. Your brain then gives that moment VIP treatment: more attention, more detail, more staying power. But here's the twist. Emotion doesn't just decide what you remember. It also rewrites how you remember it. You might recall an argument and feel rage rise again. But was the moment truly as sharp, as cruel, as loud as you remember? Or have the years reshaped it? Emotions can heighten details or blur them. They can amplify a smile into a rescue or dim a kindness into silence. If you felt shame, your memory might exaggerate what others said. If you felt pride, you might remember more triumph than truth. And this happens even when you're not aware of it. You don't choose which feelings color a memory. They slip in as the brush strokes are being laid, shaping the final picture in ways you'll never fully see. There's a subtle eeriness in that. Your happiest moment might not have been so perfect. Your worst day might not have been so cruel. But that's not what your body remembers. Your nervous system remembers the surge, the trembling, the warmth, the silence after. You carry memories not just in thought, but in muscle, in posture, in breath. And this makes memory deeply personal. Two people can share the same moment, yet remember it in entirely different ways. One sees a celebration, the other, a rejection. Both are true in the emotional sense. And when your memory returns to that moment, it doesn't ask for permission. It brings the feeling back with it. That's why some memories are exhausting. You don't just remember them, you relive them. The heart speeds, the chest tightens. Your mind plays the same loop again and again, as if understanding it just once more might change it. Researchers still debate whether this is healing or harm. Does emotional memory help us grow? Or does it trap us in repetition? Maybe it depends on how we hold it. You lie there now, still and quiet, and begin to recall something emotional, a loss perhaps, or a joy so sharp it almost ached. Feel the echo of it. Notice where it lands in your body, not to judge, not to change, just to notice. Because noticing is the beginning of release. Sometimes memory gets stuck, especially when emotions are too strong to process. Your brain stores fragments instead, sights, sounds, smells, like jagged pieces of a puzzle you don't yet have the edges for. That's why a scent can shatter you, or a sound can pull you backward in time. Emotional memory bypasses logic. It goes straight to the body. But here's the gentle truth. Just as emotion once shaped a memory, new emotion can reshape it again. With kindness, with safety, with softness. That's what you're doing now in this quiet space. You're revisiting memory without urgency. You're letting it float, not to fix it, not to judge it, just to let it be seen again with different eyes. And maybe, just maybe, this soft retelling can change the way the story lives inside you. Because if memory is always being edited, then you are never trapped. You are never frozen. You are always allowed to feel something new, even about something old. So breathe. Let your emotions settle around your memories like a mist. Let them clarify some moments and blur others. There's no need to hold them tightly. They are not truths carved in stone. They are weather patterns, passing clouds. And tonight you watch them drift. You're floating now, low and slow, as if time itself has softened. And somewhere in the stillness, a hallway appears, faint, narrow, lined with reflections, blurry and mismatched, like fragments of a dream caught behind glass. This is where your earliest memories live, not in order, not in clarity, but in echoes. Inside a mirror maze your mind has quietly built over the years. You reach into childhood, expecting to find a moment, a birthday, a playground, a bedtime ritual. And maybe you do. But if you look closely, you'll see the lines don't quite connect. The floor shifts, the reflection wavers, and you realize this memory has been visited many times before, each time leaving fingerprints behind. One quietly surprising fact from developmental psychology: most people can't recall events from before the age of 3 or 4. This is called childhood amnesia, and it's not just about forgetting. It's about never storing those early moments in a form you can retrieve later. Your brain was still wiring itself, language was still blooming. And so most of those early sensations, warmth, fear, rhythm, faces, were absorbed but not recorded in words or structure. And yet, you do remember something, right? That first toy, that smell in the kitchen, that moment in the stroller. So where did those memories come from? Maybe they weren't yours to begin with. Maybe you saw a photo, heard a story, and your mind filled in the rest, because your brain doesn't want holes in the story of you. It reaches back, even into the fog of infancy, and builds meaning. That's why so many childhood memories feel like dreams. They float, they shift shape. You remember your bedroom, but not the layout. You remember a hug, but not whose arms. Even your sense of self back then is fuzzy. Were you happy? Lonely? Curious? Or are those just feelings you've retrofitted into the image? There's something quietly eerie in that. The idea that your own beginning is mostly guesswork. Even your earliest pain, if it wasn't held in words, might exist only as a bodily echo, an unnameable ache, a reaction you don't understand. Researchers still puzzle over whether some emotional memories from early childhood can exist without conscious recall. Can your nervous system remember what your mind can't? A flinch, a fear, a tenderness that makes no logical sense. Maybe your body remembers what your story forgot. You lie here now, still and safe, and wonder how much of who you are was shaped by moments you can no longer touch. You think of the way a child sees the world, with wide eyes, with no past, just sensation, need, attachment. That's what your first memories were built from. Not narrative, but emotion, color, pattern, sound. And over time, as language grew, your brain began wrapping words around those feelings, naming them, taming them. But the original memory, the one without words, is still there, like music under static. You may never find it fully, but you can feel its influence. The way you fear abandonment, even in silence, the way certain lullabies bring tears, or why you crave a kind voice in the dark. These, too, are memories, but not the kind you can point to. They are mirror memories, reflections of reflections, shaped by others, replayed in your mind until they feel like origin stories. And that's okay, because childhood is not a museum, it's a maze. You're not meant to walk it in a straight line, only to find your way, softly, with curiosity. You might never know if the moment you recall, holding a blanket, running barefoot through grass, watching light flicker on the ceiling, was real. But if it comforts you, if it feels safe, if it reminds you that you were held, then maybe that's all it needs to be. True or not? Because sometimes the memory doesn't need to be precise, it only needs to be kind. So you keep walking, not through time, but through memory's softest maze. Mirrors all around, each one offering a different version of your beginning. And in the quiet, you stop trying to find the exact image. You simply accept the reflections and let them be. You float now in a space that feels familiar, yet indistinct. You can't quite tell if you've been here before, or if your mind is inventing the feeling of déjà vu, a hallway, a field, a room from childhood, but seen through the gauze of something dreamlike. That's because sometimes the dreams you've had don't stay in the world of dreams. They slip quietly into the gallery of memory. And over time, they hang there like portraits you assume were always real. Have you ever told a story, certain it happened, only to realize later it was something you once dreamed? A person who never existed, a moment that never occurred. But the memory of it, vivid, emotional, tangible, lingers. That's not imagination. That's not confusion. It's simply how your mind works. One quietly fascinating truth from neuroscience. The brain uses many of the same structures to process memories as it does to construct dreams. In both cases, it pulls fragments from all over, sensory data, feelings, random images, and stitches them into a scene. When you dream, your brain is practicing remembering, not because the events are real, but because the process of building meaning from fragments is the same. So sometimes the boundary between memory and dream becomes porous, especially when emotion is involved. You may dream of someone you've lost. They speak, they smile, and days later, when you remember the encounter, you can't remember whether it happened in life or in sleep. Your brain doesn't flag it. It just files it under felt real enough. And because the emotional truth was strong, the memory sticks. This is called dream reality confusion, and it's more common than you think. People often incorporate dreams into their personal narratives, believing the event was real, especially if the dream was vivid or emotionally intense. It doesn't feel like just a dream. It feels like a forgotten afternoon, a real conversation, a gentle goodbye. And maybe that's not a problem. Maybe memory isn't about what happened. Maybe it's about what mattered. That's why some dreams are harder to forget than actual days. You don't remember what you did last Tuesday, but you remember the dream you had 5 years ago. The one where your childhood pet came back. Where you walked through an unfamiliar city and felt calm. Where someone told you something you needed to hear. those dreams feel like memories, and they become part of you. Researchers still wonder what purpose these dream memories serve. Are they just glitches? Or does your mind choose to keep certain dreams because they fill something memory never gave you? Maybe the conversation you never got to have was rewritten in a dream, and now it lives in your mind as if it did happen. Maybe that comfort is real, even if the scene wasn't. The mind is more concerned with narrative and coherence than with fact, so it invites the dream to stay. It builds a room for it in the house of memory. And over time, you stop knocking on that door. You simply walk in and rest. You lie there now, remembering a dream. Not the details, just the feeling. Peaceful, surprising, vivid in ways life rarely is. You don't need to question if it was real. Ask instead, what did it give you? Did it offer closure? Did it spark wonder? Did it remind you of something you forgot to feel? Because then, in a way, it is real, just not in the way you thought. Some memories arrive while you sleep, quiet visitors who stay longer than expected. And even if you can't place where they came from, they still leave fingerprints on your soul. So let them stay. Let your dreams drift into memory. Let them blur the line. Let your mind keep building stories that don't need to be true, only meaningful. Because maybe, in the end, the dream you thought you remembered was a memory you were always meant to have. And tonight, you welcome it home. Tonight, the stillness deepens. The world outside seems paused, and as you lie there, barely moving, your mind moves through the spaces it doesn't normally enter. Not to remember, but to feel the shape of what it's forgotten. Because sometimes, forgetting is protection. You might think of forgetting as failure, as something broken in your brain, but the truth is gentler, more mysterious. Sometimes your mind forgets because it's trying to keep you safe. There's a term in psychology, motivated forgetting. It describes the brain's quiet ability to suppress memories that cause too much pain, confusion, or fear. Not by force, but by gently pushing them into shadow. You may not even notice it happening. A moment vanishes. A year becomes blurry. A conversation you once replayed over and over, now unreachable. You try to recall it and feel only static. This isn't a glitch. It's your mind stepping in, saying softly, "Not now." And sometimes, not ever. Your brain is wired to prioritize emotional survival. It doesn't care whether you remember every detail. It cares whether you can function. And so when pain threatens to overwhelm, when an experience is too much, too fast, too raw, the brain pulls a curtain. You still carry the memory somewhere deep, but it becomes inaccessible, like a sealed room at the end of a hall with no handle on the door. And sometimes you build your life around that closed door. You grow, you move forward, you create new memories, and the locked room stays hidden until one day, something small, a sound, a scent, a moment, nudges the door open, and suddenly the memory rushes back, unfiltered, unedited, alive. People describe it like drowning, or like waking up from a long, strange dream and realizing part of you had been asleep for years. This is often what happens in trauma. The memory isn't gone. It's just buried. The mind buried it for you, out of mercy. But not all forgotten memories are traumatic. Sometimes the brain simply decides a moment isn't useful, or too complicated, or too contradictory with the rest of your life's story. And so it fades, without pain, just absence. You remember the day you moved to a new house, but not the goodbye you whispered in your old bedroom. You remember the breakup, but not the last time you laughed together. The emotion didn't serve the story your brain wanted to tell, so it let it go. That's why memory feels edited, because it is. Your mind removes what disrupts the narrative flow. It softens the jagged edges, and sometimes it deletes the scene altogether. There's something quietly eerie in that you might have felt something deeply, and yet have no trace of it now. That parts of you may still ache for a moment you can no longer name. But there's also something merciful, something wise. Researchers still debate the boundary between suppression and repression. Is the brain choosing to forget, or does it simply lose access over time? Some think the line doesn't really matter. What matters is this: your forgetting is not failure. It's intelligence. It's timing. It's your mind saying, you don't need this right now, and you don't have to force the door open. You don't need to dig. If the memory is ready to return, it will. In a dream, in a word, in the sound of rain at 3 a.m. But tonight, you're allowed to rest in what you don't know, to let the blank spaces stay blank, to honor the forgetting as much as the remembering. Because sometimes the kindest thing your brain can do is give you peace instead of clarity. You exhale. You feel no urgency to search the shadows, only a soft acceptance that some memories may never come back. And that's okay. You are not incomplete. You are simply carrying what matters most. And releasing what you no longer need. Let the forgotten remain gently folded. Let the sealed doors stay closed, not out of fear, but out of trust. You are not broken. You are protected. You're floating again, but the air feels different now. Softer, wider, like walking through a place you once knew, only to find it changed. And in a way, it has, because memory doesn't sit still. It shifts, like shoreline sand beneath gentle waves. You come back to the same place, but it's never quite the same. What you remember today may not match what you remembered last year. And a decade from now, it might shift again. Not because it's wrong, but because you've changed. And so has the lens you look through. One quietly fascinating fact from cognitive psychology. Every time you recall a memory, you reconsolidate it. That means the act of remembering rewrites the memory. It doesn't come out of a mental filing cabinet, get inspected and placed back unchanged. No, it comes out, gets processed in real time, influenced by who you are now, and then saved again in a slightly new form. You update your memories without realizing it. Like a story told so many times, the words change, the pauses shift, the meaning sharpens or softens. Maybe you used to remember a goodbye as bitter, but now, after healing, you recall it with a kind of forgiveness. That doesn't make your old memory false, just unfinished. Because memories are alive. They're not data, they're relationships. Between you and who you were, between you and the world at that moment, between who you are now and who you're becoming. That's why two versions of you can look at the same memory and see different things. And it's why nostalgia can be so strange, a blend of warmth and sadness, even when the moment you're remembering was difficult at the time. That's memory reshaped by time, by distance, by growth. You might think, I was so happy back then, but were you? Or has your mind gently edited the harder parts away? Not to deceive you, but to give the past a glow that comforts rather than cuts. Sometimes this shift is healing. Other times it causes tension. You may return to a place from childhood and feel disoriented. It doesn't look the way you remembered. The walls are smaller. The light is harsher. You can't find the feeling you expected to find, because memory preserved the essence, not the details. You remembered how it made you feel, not necessarily how it was. And this happens with people too. Someone you once feared, you now see as lost or broken. Someone you once idolized, you now recognize as human. It's not revisionism, it's evolution. You are constantly reshaping your past to make peace with your present. Researchers still debate how much of memory is truly preserved over time. Some argue that core emotional truths remain intact. Others say we unknowingly rewrite our past to fit our current narrative. But either way, one truth remains. You are not remembering the moment. You are remembering the last time you remembered it. And each recall is a kind of retelling, a soft reauthoring, which means memory is not static. It's not a stone tablet buried in your mind. It's more like a garden. Things bloom, things fade. You prune what hurts, you nurture what heals, and sometimes something long dormant begins to grow again in a new shape with new light. So tonight, as you lie still and quiet, you think of a memory you've returned to often. Notice how it's changed, the colors, the emotions, the meaning. It isn't worse or better, just different, just yours in this moment. You may never know what really happened, not completely, but you know what it became. And that too is a kind of truth. So let your memories keep changing. Let them soften. Let them surprise you. Let them evolve alongside you. Because in the end, the past is not a fixed place you visit. It's a story you continue to write, even as you rest. The night grows deeper now. Thoughts slow. Breath evens. And in the quiet, a subtle question floats to the surface. Who are you? If memory is this soft, this shifting, this uncertain, you might believe you are the sum of your memories, a collection of moments stitched into a story called you. But what happens when that story keeps changing? One quietly astonishing insight from neuroscience. People with certain types of memory loss, especially episodic memory loss, can lose entire chapters of their life and yet still feel like themselves. They may not recall their wedding day, their graduation, the place they once called home, and yet they retain a sense of who they are, a kind of emotional identity independent of narrative. So maybe your identity isn't built only from memory. Maybe it's something more subtle, a tone, a rhythm, a way of moving through the world. Still, memory plays a powerful role in shaping how you see yourself. You remember failing, so you believe you're fragile. You remember being praised, so you believe you're capable. You remember being hurt, so you become cautious. You remember being loved so you feel worthy. But what if those memories aren't accurate? What if they're edited, incomplete, misunderstood? What if your entire sense of self is built on a narrative that's been quietly rewritten over time? That's not a crisis. That's an invitation to wonder, to soften, to ask, if I am not just my memories, then who am I becoming? Memory is not a mirror, it's a canvas, and you've been painting on it your whole life, sometimes with bold color, sometimes with fading strokes, sometimes with someone else's brush. The moments you return to, over and over, those become part of your identity. Not because they are the most important, but because they are the most repeated. Your brain reinforces what you revisit, and those memories in turn reinforce how you see yourself. That's why people who break out of cycles, who choose to remember new moments with more attention, often feel transformed, because they are. You are not fixed. You are not trapped in the past. You can choose which memories to hold close and which to release like breath into a dark sky. Researchers still explore how memory shapes moral judgment, personality, even long-term decision-making. Some studies suggest that the act of recalling your past changes how you behave in the future. Others find that imagining a different past, even briefly, can alter your mood, your choices, your sense of possibility. This is where memory meets imagination. You think of who you used to be, not in detail, but in feeling. And you begin to see that person is not gone. They've just been carried forward, rewritten, folded into layers. You're not the same as you were 5 years ago, or 5 weeks ago, or 5 breaths ago, because each memory, remembered, revised, or released, reshapes the way you hold yourself. So, who are you now? You might answer with your name, your history, your wounds, your hopes, but in truth, you are a moment in motion, a self still unfolding. And memory is not the anchor, it's the current, guiding you, yes, but not chaining you. So you lie here, steady, breathing gently, feeling how your memories drift through you, not as weights, but as whispers. You don't need to define yourself by them, only notice which ones you've kept and why. And maybe tonight you let one old memory go. Something heavy, something tired, not erased, just released. And in that space, you feel something else rising, a new possibility, a quieter self, not defined by the past, but gently informed by it. Not what happened, but who you've become. The air feels different now, cooler perhaps, more spacious, as if something unseen has just passed through. You lie still and you realize some memories don't arrive with clarity. They drift in like ghosts, not haunting exactly, but lingering, faint, flickering, half there. You try to focus on them and they vanish. Look away and you feel them again at the edge of your awareness. These are the ghost memories, not the ones you revisit with detail and warmth, but the ones that trail you silently, shadows you can't quite place, a face, a smell, a hallway, a dream you never quite woke up from. Sometimes they feel like they belong to another version of you, the you from a different city, a different language, a different state of mind. And you wonder, did that really happen? Or is it just emotional residue, something your heart remembers, but your mind no longer does. There's a theory in neuroscience about fragmented memory. When an event is remembered not as a whole, but as scattered sensory impressions, the temperature of a room, the texture of a coat, a flash of sound or color, but no timeline, no logic. These memory fragments often belong to moments of high emotion, when the brain couldn't encode the full story, so it stored what it could in pieces. Later, those pieces resurface, like a whisper behind a closed door, not loud enough to answer, but too clear to ignore. Some people live with these ghost memories for years, not as trauma, not always, sometimes just mystery. The strange déjà vu when you walk into a place you've never been. The sudden longing when you smell something you haven't smelled since childhood, though you can't name what it is. These are not coincidences, they're echoes from a time you don't fully recall, but that still lives inside you. And what's more curious, some of these ghost memories might not even be yours. In psychology, there's a quietly fascinating concept called intergenerational memory. The idea that the emotional residues of your parents or even grandparents can be passed down to you, not as facts or stories, but as feelings, as instincts, as patterns you can't quite explain. You might flinch at a sound they feared, feel safe near a smell they loved, cry for reasons you don't understand. Because memory isn't always stored in words. Sometimes it's stored in you. Researchers still debate how much of this is genetic and how much is learned through behavior, tone, body language. But something passes down, some weight, some memory. And perhaps those ghost feelings are echoes of someone else's life. Even in dreams, they return. A hand you never held, a path you never walked, a song you seem to know without learning. These are the mysteries memory gives you, not to solve, but to sit with. You lie here now, and maybe you feel one. A memory that doesn't fully belong, but it matters to you anyway. Maybe it's not important to know where it came from. Maybe what matters is that it's still here, waiting, watching, not to scare, only to remind. You are not just a single life. You are a convergence of stories, of sensations, of moments you may never understand. And that's okay. The mind is not a clean museum. It's an old house with doors that stick and rooms you haven't entered in years. Some are empty. Some are full of light. Some have ghosts. And tonight, you walk through them slowly. Not to name or claim, but simply to witness. Even the faintest memory has meaning, even if it never becomes clear. Let it rest beside you now, like a companion at the edge of sleep, not asking for answers, only to be felt before it fades again. The night feels old now, not in age, but in wisdom, like it's seen things long before you arrived. And as you lie here breathing slow and deep, you begin to feel something that was never quite yours, but has always lived within you. Inherited stories, memories you didn't create, but somehow carry. A quiet fear of loss, a belief about love, a dream you didn't choose, but chase anyway. They aren't random, they come from somewhere. One quietly haunting discovery in recent neuroscience and epigenetics. Experiences, especially traumatic or emotional ones, can leave biological marks on DNA, not changing the genetic code itself, but how it's expressed. a grandmother who fled a war, a father who never spoke about what hurt him. Their pain didn't vanish. It shaped their bodies, and in time, their children's. In mice, this was observed clearly. If a mouse was conditioned to fear a certain smell, its offspring, never exposed to that smell, also feared it. Their brains were different, their reactions automatic. And in humans, it's more complex, more subtle. But the patterns are there. You might fear abandonment, though no one ever left you. You might avoid conflict, though you were never harmed, because the people before you did, and their nervous systems told a story your body listened to. Memory is not just what you remember, it's what you embody. Sometimes that means you carry burdens that weren't yours to carry. Shame that was passed like a family heirloom. Silence handed down as safety. Love taught through survival instead of tenderness. And you wonder, lying here in the dark, how many of your deepest beliefs were inherited, not discovered? The idea that love must be earned, that joy must be brief, that softness is unsafe. These aren't always your thoughts. Sometimes they're echoes from generations behind you. And yet, they shape you, not to harm you, but because survival once depended on them. But here's the quiet miracle. What's passed down can also be released. Memory is not destiny. It is material, and you are the sculptor now. Just by noticing the stories you inherited, you begin to loosen their hold. You don't need to know every detail of your family's past. You only need to ask, is this belief really mine? If the answer is no, you can let it float. You can thank it for protecting your ancestors and set it down. You are allowed to write a different story. Researchers call this intergenerational healing, the process by which a person often unknowingly becomes the turning point, the first to notice, the first to ask, the first to change. You might feel alone in that role, but you're not. All around the world, people are waking up to the idea that memory is not just backward looking. It's a bridge between what was and what could be. You lie here now, and you feel the weight of stories that came before you. Some loving, some heavy, some still unnamed. You don't need to sort them all tonight. You only need to remember. Not all of them belong to you, and not all of them need to continue. You are the point at which memory becomes choice, the place where old echoes are met with new voices, and in the stillness, you begin to hear your own. Not louder, just clearer. A gentle reminder that even inherited memory can be transformed with awareness, with breath, with sleep. So breathe now and let the stories settle. Not forgotten, not denied. Just laid down for tonight. You're almost weightless now, not gone, just gently suspended, as if your thoughts are resting in a deeper layer and your body is simply floating through places it once loved. Because memory isn't only stored in the mind, sometimes it lives in places. A staircase, a street corner, the sound of a gate closing at dusk. These aren't just settings, they're containers. Vessels for moments you thought you forgot. You walk into an old room and suddenly you're 6 years old again. Not because you tried to remember, but because the space remembered for you. One quietly profound finding in environmental psychology. Certain environments, especially those tied to emotion, can act as memory cues, triggering vivid, involuntary recollections. These are called episodic memory engrams. They're like invisible bookmarks. Touch the right one, and the whole chapter comes rushing back. You don't even need to understand it. You just feel it. The air thickens. Your eyes blur, and some version of you, younger, braver, lonelier, stands beside you again. Places do that. They hold you long after you leave, and sometimes they hold more than you're ready to carry. A park bench that remembers a goodbye, a hallway that echoes a fight, a window that still holds the reflection of who you once were. You may try to forget, but the place remembers. And if you return not just as yourself, but as a layered self. Present you, past you, and all the versions in between. That's why revisiting old places can be so intense. Not because the space changed, but because you did. And yet, something lingers. The dust, the angle of light, the scent of worn wood. It all speaks to you, even if you can't quite name the language. There's a term, autobiographical place memory. It means that some parts of your life are so fused with the space they happened in, they can't be separated from it. Your first kiss on a rain-soaked bridge, the silence of your childhood bedroom after a storm, the chair your grandmother always sat in, now empty, but never just a chair. These places don't just remind you, they hold you. Even years later, when you think you've outgrown them, they remain unchanged in some quiet corner of your mind. And some places you never return to, by choice or by circumstance. But memory returns anyway, in dreams, in glimpses, in sounds so familiar it aches. The mind keeps a map, and sometimes you find yourself wandering those mental streets in your sleep, not lost, just remembering. Researchers still study how place-based memory differs from abstract memory, why certain memories are stronger when anchored to a location, why returning to a childhood home can make time collapse, why a single step into a long-forgotten room can undo years of distance. Maybe it's because memory isn't linear. It's spatial. It lives in the corners and walls and sunlight patterns. And perhaps some places miss you too. Perhaps the trees noticed when you stopped walking past. Perhaps the dust stirred when you thought of returning. It's not magical. It's not fantasy. It's simply that memory, like emotion, leaves traces, not just in people, but in the world. And when you revisit a place, you might find those traces still waiting, not to haunt, but to welcome. So you lie here now, and maybe a place comes to mind. Not clearly, just a feeling, a window, a color, a sound. Let it rise, let it hold you, not to pull you backward, but to remind you, you've been many places, you've been many people, and you are still carried by those quiet landscapes inside you. Tonight, let them visit, let them pass like gentle tides. They are not calling you back. They are simply saying, we remember too. You're far from the beginning now, drifting softly at the edge of thought. The past feels more like water than stone, fluid, cool, endlessly reflective. And in this quiet place, memory no longer demands answers. It simply breathes with you. The mind, you see, isn't built to store facts. It's built to find meaning. That's why your memories aren't perfect. They were never meant to be. They're stitched from emotion, colored by time, frayed at the edges by dreams and desire. You remember the moments that shaped you, but not always how they happened, just how they felt, what they left behind. And that's enough. One final truth, drawn from contemplative science. People who age with peace often share one trait. They let go of precision. They embrace memory not as a record, but as a companion, a soft presence, a story that breathes with them, not for them. You are allowed to forget. You are allowed to change the ending of a memory, if it brings you comfort, to imagine it ended with a smile, or a kind word, or simply peace. That's not lying, that's healing. Researchers still wonder whether self-deception in memory is harmful or protective, but those who've lost, those who've lived long enough to understand sorrow, they know the answer already. Sometimes the mind gives you just enough of the truth to live with it, and the rest it leaves softened as if wrapped in silk. You lie here now, surrounded by the tapestry of what you've lived and what you think you've lived. Both are valid. Both have shaped you. You are not a collection of perfect recollections. You are the living result of what you chose to carry. And tonight, you carry less. You've laid things down. You've let time breathe through them. You've let meaning rise to the surface, while details drift away. There's nothing more to remember, nothing to fix, no final image to capture. Just this moment, this breath, this gentle closing of thought. And so, you let it all go. The memories, the questions, the quiet ghosts. Not forgotten, just unheld. They settle behind you like a long trail through the fog, still there, but fading gently with distance. You're not drifting backward anymore. You're simply still. The hum of your breath, the softness of the dark, the faint echo of stories, not demanding your attention, only wrapping around you like warmth. Let the air be easy now. Let your thoughts quiet. Let your heartbeat be the only rhythm that matters. You don't need to remember tonight. You don't need to sort the real from the imagined. You only need to rest. This body, this mind, this soul that's carried so much, they are allowed to be still. If memories return later, let them. If dreams rise from the edges of sleep, let them pass. You are safe now. Safe to release. Safe to forget. Safe to begin again tomorrow. That's all for tonight. Let your mind keep floating or drift into sleep. I'll be here again next time.